Welcome to the Atomic Impact Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Osborne, and on this podcast, we interview successful business owners for them to share atomic, impactful lessons that they've learned, and they can share with you as well. As always, this show is sponsored by the LinkedIn Reverse Podcast Method, the new way to close deals that doesn't rely on the old traditional methods that everyone hates. We use this method to generate and book 26 qualified leads and get sales calls in 10 days without any ad spend, outreach, or endless social media posting. If you want to find out more, direct message me on LinkedIn to have a chat at Jason A. Osborne. The link will be in the profile notes here on the podcast. But today's guest is Chris Pearse, and Chris runs a business. It's totally geared to coach leaders and executives from the inside out. So Chris, thank you on being on the show. And I want to start off with asking a question that I usually ask everyone that comes on, and I find it really helpful, and it's always really interesting what people have to answer around this. And the question is this: if you were to have some sort of time machine and go back to the beginning of when you started business, what piece of advice, what's the number one piece of advice that you would tell you the younger version of yourself?
Wow. Okay. Say no a lot.
Expand on that. Because I think that's a great concept. A lot of people don't.
Yeah.
They hear it, but don't really understand it.
And it's about setting boundaries. I think that's the kind of modern way of terming it. But saying no is really an expression of putting discrimination into action. And the reason it's important is that. Right, I've completely lost my thread, Jason. Sorry about that. Are you able to cut?
Yeah, we'll just carry on. This is the whole part of it, like just kind of where you are in the thought process around that, and saying no. It's a huge concept, and I know with you working with leaders and executives, oftentimes I just know, just because I work with a lot of executive and leaders as well. It's one of those things where they just say yes too much, and creating those boundaries. I think it's great conversation.
Oh, I do. I learned it from a couple of stints as an interim CEO, where I came into small businesses to help stabilize them or turn them around. And what I found was that the previous leaders who had, in a sense, got the business into the mess that it was in, had really allowed stuff to happen, and a lot of it was around trying to be nice and wanting to be liked by people, and that really got in the way of them saying, no, this is enough, stop, this is a boundary here, you're crossing it. And in one case, it had got seriously bad. In fact, more than one case where a particular rogue manager had really almost taken over control of the company. And in both cases, the CEOs did not know how to respond to this. They just didn't have the gumption, I suppose, to push back and say enough's enough, no more. In fact, what they had to do was ultimately terminate the employment of these people. But what I noticed on both those occasions and others is that what was driving that very negative behavior on the part of the CEOs was this overwhelming desire to be perceived as nice, fair, compassionate, all those nice, empathetic words. Yeah. And in fact, I'm about to write an article on toxic empathy, which will,
that's a good topic.
Which will bring up similar kinds of themes, because and I see this in LinkedIn all the time. This yearning to be fair, to be nice, to be kind, to be gentle, and look, I'm not saying that doesn't have a place. We all need to be kind, nice, gentle, and generous human beings. but not all the time. It's almost as if the world is searching for an absolute quality that we have to impose on human beings in order to perfect their behavior. There isn't one.
Yeah.
The only dictum I've come across that holds in all circumstances is know thyself, or to thine own self be true. Those two work. Nothing else works as far as I can work out. And certainly being kind, being nice, being liked, all of that stuff is ultimately insidious and pernicious. So the answer to that question is say no more. How do you do that? You have to relate and you have to be true to your innermost feelings, hence leadership inside out. And you have to let that guide you from within, not what's going on around you.
Yeah.
Because that will get you into deep trouble. And funnily enough, bring up another favorite word at the moment, integrity, to be referencing people outside of you or things outside of you rather than referencing that innermost sense of guidance, of direction and guidance. Sorry. To do anything other than that is to compromise your integrity, is literally to tear the fabric of the integrity, which is the definition of the word corrupt.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there you are.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So when it comes to that whole thing around being nice, that kind of toxic empathy that you're talking about, obviously, as you said, there's a place for that, but where's the starting point for people who have kind of they recognize they're in that, they're kind of in a trap in that. What's the first kind of stepping points to start coming out of that and changing it so they're not being kind of almost controlled by everyone else because everyone's just so used to them being said yes to, but all of a sudden they may have a perception of, oh, they're not as nice anymore and all that. Where's those beginning steps for them to start taking?
Well, it's funnily enough, it boils down to knowing more about how the human mechanism works. It's discovering more about your inner mechanics and dynamics. Who are we? What are we? More importantly, what are we not? And one of the big mistakes I think we're all guilty of is believing that we are our thoughts and feelings. We're moving away from believing that we're our bodies, certainly in this century, but we still default to believing that we are our thoughts and feelings. And that's a huge trap because we're not. So I would say that in fact that this is why I started to write material and I now deliver programs rather than just coach, because there's a lot of basic information and knowledge about how a human being is constructed, what lies behind the surface of them, that is key to being able to navigate these challenges. So I can't deliver all of that in our chat together. But one of the most important things, as I said, is that we are not our thoughts. Who we are is, in essence, a just being. It's just being. And we very easily confuse this with all the doing that we need to do in order to survive the human experience. I'm not saying we mustn't think or feel or do. We have to do all of those things, but that's not who we are. And if you can start to get some distance between who we are and what we think we are, that's the key. It's also the key to resilience. It means you are far less impacted by the slings and arrows, if you like, of daily life and corporate life.
Yeah. No, that's good. It's good. It's definitely one of those things that it's just you see it all the time. I know I've definitely been through through that as well, and had to learn like just different things on how to be able to say no more, create those boundaries, which I think is a huge thing for people. And I think some people come by it really naturally, and other people don't. It's a learned skill in that. But yeah. Well, one of the other things, Chris, I'd be interested in knowing is, besides saying no more, what's one of the biggest mistakes that you've made in your business that ended up being one of the biggest blessings in disguise, like lessons that you learned?
Yeah, um, I think it's one of the biggest ones. I mean, it's just a succession, really, of. I suppose the biggest mistake is using that word, mistake. Labeling anything a mistake is a mistake,
Hmm.
because there is no failure.
Hmm.
There absolutely is no failure. And the problem with labeling something a failure is that it will impact you emotionally.
Yeah.
So I think that's it. Don't think in terms of mistakes, in errors, in failures. Think in terms of data, um, experience, all of that stuff, because you cannot learn from everything going right. If everything goes right, you will not learn, you will not develop, you will not be alive. Simple
Yeah.
as that. So, in a sense, success, at its limit, success in the way we think of it is death, because there is no expansion from it.
Hmm.
So that's a pretty
Yeah.
big lesson. I think you'll agree.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. As a matter of fact, I often tell my clients, you want to like failure is actually part of the game. It's what you have to do that. And the most successful people that I've actually seen and been around, and lessons I've learned as well, is you want to just fail as fast as you can and fail often,
Yeah.
because you have those reiterations that you learn from. If you're trying to avoid making a quote unquote mistake, or perceived failure, then you never learn. You never learn those things. So totally agree with you, 100%. I think
Yeah.
labeling something as a mistake, you stop the learning experience from it. Nothing wrong with going, God, I wish I wouldn't have done that. We think we often
Oh,
think
yeah.
that sometimes, but if we
Yeah.
learn from it, that's where we, take those steps forward, which I think is really, really important. So, yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's really, really key. Yeah, good piece of advice there. Well, we're almost coming up to the end. I know it's just flown by. I looked down. I was like, oh my gosh, we're almost to the end of the 15 minutes. But Chris, if anyone wants to learn more about you, where can they find you? You have a website that they can go to?
Yeah, you bet. chrispearse.co.uk, but Pierce is spelt with an S, Pearse. So they can find me there. They can find me on, oh, well, they can find me on TikTok now, believe it or not.
Yeah.
You can also find a couple of books that I wrote, Broken CEO and Struggling Entrepreneur, on Amazon, YouTube videos, LinkedIn, all the usual outlets and media.
All the usual places. Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thanks, Chris, for being on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure for you being here. And as a reminder for everybody, the Atomic Impact Podcast, where we interview successful business owners so we can just learn bits of atomic, impactful information to help us in what we're doing. And as always, the show is sponsored by the LinkedIn Reverse Podcast Method, the new way to close deals that doesn't rely on any of the old traditional methods that everyone hates. Again, if you want to find out more, direct message me on LinkedIn and we can have a chat. So that's on LinkedIn, Jason A. Osborne. Chat to you next time. Cheers.